everybody, and welcome to North 100, a Canadian Highlander podcast. I'm Serge. Joining me today, I have a Jer
Hello.
and a Wheeler.
I love Magic Online.
Reminder that North 100 is brought to you by you with your support at the Patreon over at patreon.com/loadingreadyrun. Let's jump right into the best card that you're not playing, and up today is me. Now, as the undisputed premier Lands pilot of the format.
Nope.
So,
Nope.
you have anything to add there, Wheeler?
Well, I mean, just because we're not in the same room here, Serge, doesn't mean you can get away with such an egregious claim. But you know what? Go ahead and get yourself one.
So, right, where was I? Right, the premier lands pile of the format. I want to talk about a fantastic card you should probably be including in your lands brews, and it's a 1-drop for a single green mana that isn't fast bond. No, I'm talking about Jaddy Offshoot.
Good with fast bond.
I mean, it's great with fast bond. So for 1 mana, you get yourself a 0/3 plant. It has Defender, and I know what you're saying. That doesn't sound great, but it has an amazing line of text. Landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. And like Jer said, this card is fantastic with fast bond. So let's talk about the other use cases first. It's great against an aggressive deck. It blocks Goblin Guide all day. Even if you're not comboing off, you're going to get quite a bit of incidental life gain, just playing lands as you regularly will. And as a lands deck, you're probably not going to miss any. It's landfall, so it negates the damage off of a fetch land. It's not whenever you play a land, it's whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control. But if you've got a fast bond in play, this card really starts to pop off. And it's what I like to call a little combo enabler. This is a card that will enable fast bond loops through your Crucible, through replaying lands over and over with your Oboros or your Malucos. Maluco, that's correct, right? Maloku, right. I was like, that sounds wrong to me.
Premier Lands pilot, eh?
Well, I'm the premier Maloku Mystic Sanctuary pilot in the format. All
right, I'll concede that one to you there, Jer. Yeah, I don't know. Jaddy Offshoot, it slices, it dices, it should absolutely have a home in your lands deck, particularly if you're trying to do combo shenanigans off of fast bond. Either of you have anything to add about it?
Yeah, I was less on this card until we received a little ditty in the form of Sabine's Reclamation that previous landfall life gain cards were all like Courser of Krufix is a 3-drop and Tatiova is a 5-drop and whatnot. But at least Jaddy Offshoot, it's kind of niche, but again, it's those cases that really make the lands decks tick where everything can it just works together in perfect harmony.
Yeah.
And so being able to get this back as one of those pieces off of a Sabine's Reclamation, it's just the whipped topping on your cupped cake.
Really quick, can you tell us what Sabine's Reclamation does?
Sure. So Sabine's Reclamation is a sorcery, 2 and a white. Return target permanent from your graveyard to the battlefield that has converted mana cost 3 or less. And then if this was cast from your graveyard, you may copy this spell and choose new targets. And then it has flashback for 4 and a white. So very potent, in general in Highlander, but especially for the lands deck where it can get back basically anything.
I think the big reason Jaddy Offshoot is so strong is because of how cheap it is. Also being a 0/3, like Hedron Crab, another amazing card that does similar things as an 0/2, just doesn't block as well. Like this card is perfectly costed for where it wants to play into your deck. So for example, if you already have a fast bond in play, it's a lot easier to play Crucible, Jaddy Offshoot, and have your combo pieces as opposed to playing 2 more expensive pieces. Like being 1 mana, it's hard to really express just how much value it has in that spot.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, let's introduce today's theme. As you can no doubt tell by the fact that we're animated cartoons that are talking right now instead of the 3 of us in a room, well, the waves hands generally in the air. The situation's a little bit tough right now, in particular when it comes to getting together and playing Magic in a room with your friends. Um, welcome to Magic during the time of COVID-19. So today's episode is going to be a focus on how do we play Magic when we can't get together, and what are some of the struggles that we've been having right now. And I know Wheeler in particular has a couple of things he wants to talk about, a cost to the format, to Highlander in particular right now, due to the current situation. Start us off, friend.
Yeah, so we're going to touch on the ways to actually get the games going. But let's start off with something that's kind of unfortunate, is that we've had Ikoria and to a lesser extent Commander 2020 in kind of like our minds as a complete set for almost a month now. Maybe time's an odd thing right now. But at the same time, because we don't have a paper release as of this recording for either of them, and even on Magic Online, we don't have Commander 2020 available for whatever reason. It's difficult to really get like a snapshot of what these new cards are doing, what the format's going to look like, because whether or not it's a good thing, sets in the past 1 to 2 years, every time a new set drops, it does a whole bunch of stuff to the format. And you end up, especially sets like Ikoria, there's a whole bunch of juice that's getting pumped into archetypes that are, not tier one, not even tier like two. So you have this set that's like the perfect breeding ground for brewing and designing, and you really want to get your hands on it, but you can't right now. And that's a little, or like not as reliably. So that can lead to a little bit of like stagnation in the
Sure.
development. Like we can plant a flag and say, like, this is what I want to do with Death and Taxes, but you won't have enough to go from that starting idea to something down the line.
Well, like Marshall Sutcliffe likes to call it, the machine, where you hand this massive pool of cards to the machine and the machine just starts to grind and grind and grind and grind. And then the metagame emerges from that. The best cards sort of rise to the top, and the archetypes that aren't as competitive, or the cards that don't fit as well, kind of get pushed down to the bottom. And that's just from people playing them and people seeing them. And so I guess you're saying here that because fewer people are playing Magic, fewer people are testing, and we're seeing less and less what Ikoria actually has to offer, just due to lack of data.
Right. Yeah. Lack of data, lack of availability to get people going. Right. All you need is one kind of droplet of the food coloring in like in a pool, and it starts to it sets the trend off. It gets it going. So you need, when you have more people playing, even in a community as large as say the Canadian Highlander community, it doesn't need many people. If you have a handful of people being like, so I played with Luris, and it was absurd. Or, and that, the people are like, so I built a polymorph deck with Luca, check it out. Like all you need is like a couple of people doing that to really get things going. But in general, with fewer people doing that, because Magic's a very social game, and especially Highlander, a very social format, right? It's all
Mm.
community driven. You just get less communication with that overall. I imagine that'll actually change once we get the paper release of Ikoria, and people are able to set up some other ways of playing Magic that we'll get to.
Sure.
But
We
yeah,
haven't
at least right now it's a little unfortunate.
we haven't heard much from Jer. Anything to add on this topic?
Not too much. Just like another reason could be that there's no paper tournaments. Like I know I was looking forward to a couple tournaments down in the States that didn't end up, or I wasn't able to go. One of them got canceled outright, and lots of people often look to see what like they do in any format, what decks are winning the biggest tournaments. And without really any tournaments happening right now, uh it's sort of hard because some people lose their motivation because they're competitive players, and that's part of what attracts people to this format. And if there's not sort of a tournament to look forward to, or a new brewing challenge that they can like take a tournament winning deck and see how they can improve it, sort of reduces motivation for some people, I think.
Well, you can still play, you can still brew, but maybe if you're not brewing specifically for a tournament, you're just not testing those cards in the same environment.
Totally. And some people just brew to brew, but I know some people are more like deck improvers. Like they like taking like a proven tournament winning deck and seeing how they can improve it. That's how some people get their enjoyment out of the format. And
Hmm.
without tournaments happening, that's sort of like hard to motivate yourself to do it, and hard to figure out where to start from.
Well, I think we've covered the struggles pretty well. And now here is the North 100 guide to fix this. Well, not necessarily fix this, but here are some tips and tricks to maybe playing some Highlander at home. If you've been missing the format and you've been looking for people to play with, we'll segue nicely to some of the pros here. So I think this is an excellent time to test. Although folks aren't going to tournaments and stuff like that, the stakes have never been lower. Right? Like, you get to play the game you love and you get to put in those cards. And I mean, it is tough to go to a paper event when there are prizes on the line and bring in something a little bit janky, right?
Mhm. I
It
I think
hasn't
that
stopped
now,
me, but
yeah, I think I agree with you in the sense that it's, well, I mean, I agree with both you and Jer, where it's like the competitive side of me, where it's like, all right, which Ikoria card am I going to try and break and like farm credit with? Um,
sure.
or farm events, whatever it may be. That can't really be sated right now. And but the other part of me where it's like, okay, what are some cards that I have either like completely ignored or have just like I didn't know they exist. Like, I think now is like the perfect time to do like a for lack of better, with not to give it any generalized term, like I get people asking like, Ben, how do you know this weirdo Weatherlight uncommon or whatever it may be? And like, I've been playing the game for 20 years, but I wasn't playing when Weatherlight was
Sure.
in print, and this card was also just never good when Weatherlight was in print. But like, honestly, just spending some time, like if you play, like let's say you go to like a 4-hour Magic event, once a week or whatever, maybe using that time one of these weeks or whatever, just bust open like a Scryfall, pick a converted mana cost and a card style, and just like drink it all in, baby. Because there's just so many like Canadian Highlander is like a format where there are a bunch of decks that are based entirely around like your permanence, or a majority of your permanence having a very specific set of like qualifications. So like that Martyr proc deck, the mono white Martyr deck that I've fallen in love with and has turned me to trying to break Soul Sisters. Not as an archetype necessarily, but just like the cards. I think Soul Wardens are like sleeper OP, but that could also just be the social isolation talking. But I thought about it. I thought like that before, so maybe it's only worsened it. But like thinking like, okay, well, these are all the one drop creatures that I can bring back that I play right now. I wonder what are other good one drop creatures in white that can put themselves into the graveyard like reliably. And in doing so, it's kind of a deep dive. You kind of have to get your hands dirty. But like I've I've pulled, like from just doing it, I've pulled like multiple white one drops from like the same block that have
Hmm.
relevant abilities. Like There's a card, I'm just going to name two because I don't want to put too much stress on the card reader because these are deep cuts. Resistance Fighter. It's a 1 white 1/1 human soldier from Visions, and it has Sacrifice Resistance Fighter. Target creature deals no combat damage this turn.
Good old fog on a stick. Yeah.
Right, but it's only one creature, and it's not going to be like you can do it on your turn. So you can like crunch in with all your dorky idiots, and then like that one creature that is going to get, has to unfortunately fight a Loxodon Smiter, probably not surviving. But Resistance Fighter, you can hit, make sure the thing survives, and then you can bring the fighter back on your same turn. Like, that's great. And then just like Vigilant Martyr is another one. It's a white 1/1 from Mirage. It's a human. I don't know what the other card type is. It just says Martyr.
Human cleric.
Great. Yeah, great Rebecca Gay art, by the way, Jeremy. This is some of the best Rebecca Gay art I have ever seen. And it's like, I did not know about this card until doing this.
I'm familiar.
Yeah, 1-mana 1/1, sack it, regenerate target creature. And then white tap, sack it, counter target spell that targets an enchantment, which is, you know what? The second ability,
specific,
very niche. Yeah, like I would play it.
Specific.
I would consider it for the 1-mana 1/1 sack to regenerate something, because that's kind of in the theme of the deck. But honestly, that deck also plays like a handful of enchantments that are pretty important to stick around. So it's not super, like, it's not going to be dead. That's the thing. Yeah. So I wouldn't include these in every single build. But because I took the time to do like some brewing or some testing,
because of the current situation,
yeah, I found out these cards existed, and now it's in my back pocket.
All right, let me throw it at Jer. Have you been doing any rogue brewing right now?
Not really, no.
That's fair.
I've been like messing around with some of the Ikoria cards, but not too much.
Fair enough. All right, let's talk about how we can play long distance Magic right now. We're going to start with the easy ones. Classic here, Magic Online. Both of you are known for playing Magic Online. Both of you are known for streaming Magic Online, a lot of Canadian Highlander and other stuff. What's it like if you're new, if you've never played Magic Online before and you're really missing playing Canadian Highlander? Give us a sales pitch.
Oh, Jesus. Hey, Jerry, you wanna take this one?
Yeah, I can take this one. I actually really enjoyed getting into Canadian Highlander on Magic Online. It seems very daunting, but the price point is certainly lower than in paper on average. Like, you'll get some weird cases where it's not, but and there's a bunch of different ways you can go about it. As we've explained before, there's rental services, which are most people have found pretty good, or you can start building a collection on Magic Online, which has increasing returns, because once you get like your set of fetch lands and duels, the bulk of the cost of building a new deck is often a lot lower. And it's really easy to find games basically any time of day, because of how global the Canadian Highlander Magic community is, and people's different schedules. You can get basically a game whenever you want. So I've really enjoyed that. There's also like a huge amount of deck diversity, which is also really nice. You get to be experienced to like new interesting decks that like I'd never seen in Victoria, for example. So
yeah, one of the benefits to playing online is that like the Discord has a couple of thousand people that are active all across the world. And this, not only is it, bringing in player kind of diversity for as far as regional goes, but you're getting people that are bringing in other experiences from, say, stuff like European Highlander, or like the French Commander duel, like the dual French Commander. And then you pair that with the fact that, a lot of people also use like rental services for Magic Online. So they can just try out whatever deck they want. I mean, as long as it doesn't have Uro, because that card's like a million tickets. But Uro aside,
Really?
they can. Yeah, I don't want to get into it though.
All right,
It's
that's fair.
but other than a couple of standard cards, or rather cards in standard sets that are ludicrously expensive, they can at the touch of a dial, they can basically just have whatever deck they want in front of them, and then they can apply what their instincts are for singleton, which can draw from other influences. So you're going to get decks you haven't seen, cards you haven't seen, and that's great. Like that's to me, that's what Highlander and community formats are all about. It's about the community expression of these different archetypes.
Definitely.
And all right, and to be fair, what are some of the difficulties of Magic Online? We don't want to paint it as a utopia if that's not the reality.
Well, getting into the program, there's definitely a bit of a barrier to entry. Like, I'm sure Ben will agree with me that there's no tilt quite like the first time you F6 and it loses you a game.
Oh yeah, I like my literal. It's the platform that I have spent the past year working on, and I still don't know why certain things happen, why my turn gets skipped. Like I imagine a lot of it is like visual stuff, but that's also just speaks to some of the clunkier issues of the program.
When I was streaming more often, I had a saying like, "Oh, that was a win in paper," like
Oh yeah,
it's just like a mistake that lost me a game that I would never make in paper. Like there was a game where I was casting Tainted Pact, and I was like chatting with my chat because I was just clicking to find. I can't remember what card I was trying to find. It was probably Oracle, and it ended up being the last card in my library. But I was doing this on my opponent's turn. So I actually, if I was in paper, I would have like realized that I only had one card left, just taken the second last card, drawn the Oracle for the turn, and then
of
won.
Course.
Mm-hmm.
But because Tainted Pact, you're looking at cards in your library. When I clicked, it looked like I still had one card left in my library. So I clicked again, and then the spell just resolved, and I was like, oh no.
Yeah.
So like, win in paper.
Magic Online is like the ultimate actually program.
I was gonna say, yeah. Well, we're all judges. We all have a basic understanding of how the game works, but then Magic Online is, do you actually know how the game works?
Right. Like if somebody asks us as a judge, like what the mechanics of resolving cards like Tainted Pact are, or Sleight of Hand is a big one, Gifts Ungiven, Fact or Fiction, that style of card, we can break it down. But also just like Magic isn't played like that. Like things are very intuitive. Like if I cast a Sleight of Hand, I'm going to look at two cards. One goes to my hand, one goes to the bottom. And if you asked me, like, out of nowhere, hey, Ben, what are you selecting with Sleight of Hand? Like, are you selecting which cards goes to the bottom, or are you selecting which cards goes to your hand?
I mean, Gifts Ungiven is the classic one.
Yeah.
Like, the amount of times I cast Gifts and my opponents just like gave me the wrong cards, and I was just like, oh no, it's a disaster. Because the cards they choose, it's like, which cards do you select? And I actually think they made it better. I think there's like a zone and it's labeled graveyard in hand, but it used to be like, choose two of these four cards, and the two cards they chose went to the graveyard. It's just so unintuitive, because like when you play in paper, they're like, here, you get these cards. They don't.
Well, so much of what we do in paper is shortcuts, right? Because there's an empathy you have with the person across from you. You communicate a lot just in the gestures you do with your body and handing stuff. And since both players understand the game, you can fix a lot of that. And the computer, you're trying to do that same thing, but a computer is trying to interpret a lot of it, right?
Yeah.
While we're on the topic of Gifts Ungiven, I'm going to list off a couple of cards. Card Reader doesn't need to do anything about this. In fact, a lot of people will know what these are because they're all staples, but they also share another quality. I'm gonna let y'all try to figure out what it is. Gifts Ungiven, Kess Dissident Mage, Harsh Mentor, Misdirection, Custody Lich, Containment Priest, Scarab God, Rancor, Kalitas Trader of Get, Dream Halls, Spell Queller, Balance, any card that has hybrid mana, adventure cards, Scrap Trawler. Any guesses?
Cards that change zones?
Well, that might be a recurring feature.
Cards people mess up on Magic Online?
Well, it's cards that Magic Online messes up. This is a list of cards that are all currently bugged in some way, shape, or form
Oh, well.
on Magic Online.
How was I supposed to get that right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is another downside. Not all of these are going to be super, popular. Like some of them, like Scrap Trawler, you just can't use, which, I kind of wanted to try and break Song of Creation and Eggs because it's kind of busted, but I have to wait. But like even beyond that, there's just a bunch of other kind of interactions that are inconsistent due to bugs for Magic Online. And you know what? Honestly, they've gotten better. Like people give Magic Online a hard time. It's not a bad platform. It's great for what you're looking to do with it. You'll come into issues anytime a new set gets launched, but honestly, they try to get it fixed as quickly as possible. The last thing these people want is their game to not be, playable.
Totally. Another issue is actually card availability, and that not every card is on Magic Online. And it doesn't come up that often, but like, for example, what's the really bad 3-mana sorcery speed vampiric tutor, Ben?
Cruel Tutor.
That's still not on, right?
No, Cruel Tutor's on.
It is on. Okay.
But there's Omen, like a Storm staple.
Foresight's a big one for me. Like I love the food chain decks, and Foresight is one of the best cards in the deck.
Sorceress Sight.
Can't play it.
Interesting.
You can't play Turbo Fog. I don't know why you'd want to, but honestly, Magic Online would make that experience probably a bit less painful. But basically 5 different fog variants at 1 mana are not available on Magic Online, which is kind of awkward for that deck. There's about 60 cards that are not available on the client, which that are relevant to the format.
Is Regal
but again,
Behemoth
their relevancy.
in yet?
Nope, Regal Behemoth is not
that's
in.
brutal.
So like
right,
it's not.
I don't want to spend too much time crapping on it, right?
Yeah. Oh come on!
No, I mean,
come on, Serge, we need an outlet.
Ben and I have spent hundreds of hours playing this.
I can feel you've bottled these feelings, and I appreciate that. All right, let's give a conclusion on Magic Online. If people want to play Canadian Highlander, is this a good place to go?
Definitely.
The fact that Jared and I just spent, we just poured out all of the misery that we have towards this client and still like express that, yes, you should look into playing with this. You should talk to the community of people that play with it. I mean, it speaks to, I guess, the strength of the format, but also the fact that like it gets the job done. It's enjoyable, and like you will be better off by exploring it than leaving it be.
Cool. All right, let's talk about something folks might not think about with Canadian Highlander, and that's actually the new Arena client. And we do have to add an asterisk to this. This is not Canadian Highlander. Instead, it's something a little different. Wheeler, take us away.
So I assume this is about Gladiator.
Yes.
Great. So Gladiator is a 100-card singleton format that more or less transplants like the skeletal frame of Canadian Highlander, like how you play it. 100-card singleton, 20 life, 1v1, no commander, sideboard, all that jazz. No companions. And
you'll love to see it.
Yeah, it's great. Your card pool is literally anything you can collect on Arena, which includes like historic anthology sets, and like the
Does
cards
it include
that they provide.
Oko?
I'm glad you asked, Jared. We don't have a points list because we're not a format that has Black Lotus and 25,000 cards. So we have a ban list. And the ban list is currently just Oko Thief of Crowns, aka one of the best cards of all time. It's it was a hard decision. And genuinely, it kind of was a hard decision because the format was birthed by a collective of passionate singleton players coming from stuff like Canadian Highlander. And we hate the word banned. Like, that's a huge appeal of our format. But for the sake of diversity and making the format as best as it can be, we banned Oko.
I also think it feels a bit better to ban cards in a digital or primarily digital format than in a paper format.
Yeah,
I guess
absolutely.
we don't get into it too much because it's not a gladiator podcast, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess we want to add on that there is a complete Gladiator episode of Tap Tap Conceit that Wheeler was on that went up earlier this week. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it went up a couple of days ago. But honestly, like, part of me wishes that I wasn't so directly attached to it, because I can't sing the praises of the format enough. Like, it has absolutely helped scratch the highlight, like a singleton itch. The format is so much fun, and it feels like early Canlander. Like,
Cool.
it's great. I highly recommend it.
So I suppose let's just talk about Arena really quickly, because this is the new digital client that Wizards has been promoting. A lot of people are on it. A lot of streamers are on it. It's shiny, but how far back does the card pool go?
So currently the card pool just goes back till not Ixalan, Dominaria, I guess, is the first one. You get like M19 Dominaria Ixalan block and then forward. But they're adding older sets in. So at the end of, or sometime this summer, we're getting Amonkhet block. And there's plans to get Kaladesh. And they have anthology sets, which they will add like a curated smaller set of older cards, which Serge, the most recent one, includes Hondin's and Enchantress's Presence and Mirari's Wake. So, maybe that's
Holy
up
moly.
your alley.
Holy
But
moly.
yeah, it doesn't go way, way back, but you definitely get a feel of like playing with weirdo old tools that you didn't have a chance to play, frankly, anywhere.
All right, that's exciting. All right, let's talk about quite possibly the new hotness. And this is something that I didn't really see a lot of people doing prior to this, but now a lot of people are picking up, and that's playing Magic, playing actual paper Magic over video calls. So, Affinity for Artifacts, Olivia Gobert Hicks, was streaming this for a while prior to this, but like that's a great example if you've been watching that on Twitch how to do it. But I've even heard people in the Canadian Highlander community doing Magic over Discord and setting it up. And Jer and Wheeler, have either of you done this, and what are your experiences with it?
I haven't done it personally just because my setup in my house doesn't actually give me like a good spot to have. I have a desktop computer and my desk just like isn't big enough to also like adjust my webcam and play Magic on it. And I don't have a laptop to like, MacGyver the laptop such that it's looking down at me playing Magic. But I know a local community member is hosting tournaments every Monday
Really?
via the Facebook group. So yeah, if this tickles your fancy, then definitely check out the Canadian Highlander Facebook group, and he's posting every week. So
Yeah,
What about you, Wheeler?
I've done it a couple of times. I've done it more for like admittedly Commander, but I've done Canlander a couple of times. It's what if you have the space available, or like ideally just something that hangs over a table, to get it to work, then it's pretty. I'd recommend looking into setting it up. It's funny because it's one of those things that a lot of like Canadian Highlander adjacent communities have been doing forever. So stuff like the old school community, like the 93, 94 Magic, the pre-modern community, like other variants, basically communities that are really into old cards and like to play that. And again, community driven. They've always had Magic Online as an option, and a lot of people do use it. And for some tournaments, they do use it. But like at the end of the day, we're all just doing it to play these cards that we love. And, the aesthetic quality of these cards is also just a huge driving force behind player engagement and involvement. And so, this is the kind of thing that's been happening. And so I would say look to how those communities have also kind of organized things. Because yeah, it's something that it definitely scratches that itch too. Like, as much as I like the online clients, it showing off a Bomberman loop online takes a long time.
Well,
Whereas in
not
paper,
just
you just kind of fling around your hand in your Black Lotus and hopefully they get the point.
Yeah, you just start waving your hands a bit, and
Yeah.
then
like the benefit of the video call is you actually get to talk to your opponent. I mean, one downside of
Mm-hmm.
Magic Online in Arena is you're playing the computer. And I mean, here's a confession. I'm typically known as being like a pretty chill person and a pretty friendly person. I can tilt out pretty hard if I'm playing Arena by myself. Like, the saltiest I've ever been is playing Magic Arena against the computer because there's not a person there, and I'm yelling at the computer like, "What do you mean another land off the top?" Right?
Saltier than that one time where you like wildfired my entire board, developed a couple of planeswalkers and a moat, and still lost. Because that's pretty salty, Serge. Serge, hello.
Oh, just stab me in the heart. Okay, I mean that's a different kind of salt. That's a different kind of salt. But you flustered me. But honestly, the experience of being able to have a social experience while playing Magic is what the video call is really about, right? Because like you play your bomb, and even in say the situation where I think I'm ahead on board and you completely crush me in my hopes and the dreams, that's still something that we've done together.
Mm-hmm.
And as much as Magic Online and Arena are great alternatives, it I don't know, I still feel that there's something missing of actually playing with your friend.
Oh, like Magic when you can't rib on your opponent or like talk about a bad beat later or whatever. It's like we all kind of moan and groan when somebody rolls up with like a bad beat story at a tournament where it's like, look, I don't care that you missed your land drop. I really don't. Like, I'm sorry for you, but I really don't. But when you don't have that, then you're like, oh, I kind of just wish like somebody would come up, knock on my door, stand 6 feet away, and be like, "You wouldn't believe it. I cast 3 draw 7s and found nothing." And it's like, oh yeah, I feel you.
Yeah, been there, been there.
Yeah.
after having workshop in my opening hand all 3
Every
games,
time!
I should have picked a different example.
you walked right into that one.
All right, well let's give some tips and tricks for people who might be trying to set up their home broadcasts. So Jared talked about some of the difficulties that he's had of actually making it work. I've done this, and I mean, obviously I have a tremendous advantage over the average person in that, I'm a professional broadcaster. I have a setup, I have lighting, I have microphone, I have friends who are extremely knowledgeable who are going to help me set up. But here are some tips and tricks that have helped me and may be able to help you as well. I think this is true of any broadcast you ever do for anything, but audio is king. And especially in a situation where you're going to be communicating with somebody else, if your video is a little bit patchy, if somebody's looking at it, you can be like, no, 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 that's a grizzly bear, right? Like, you want to be able to properly communicate what's happening to the person you're playing with. Because if you're trying to talk, and this is going to be a terrible example for the podcast, but this is a sentence where
Oh
you know,
Jesus.
it's just garbage, right? If your audio is cutting out, it's gonna make the experience really negative there. And
Hold on, let me write all these tips down.
I think probably Jared's talked about the difficulty of getting an overhanging camera to hang down, and I think people can get creative with that. You can get a bookshelf or a broom. I mean, I think a lot of people have gotten pretty creative as the way to get the overhead camera, but I think probably the hardest part is lighting. And in particular, how to light up your Magic cards so that they don't have so much glare that the person looking at the call can't actually read what they're looking at.
Well, that's sort of like just like what playing Magic in the Lige is, You're like looking over at your opponent's board and you're like, what is that? That's just like a little nostalgia, you know.
Look, I swear to God, why would Robin have a new bordered Caracas? I didn't know it was a Caracas. Like, it makes no sense. Like, come on.
I'm glad we can recreate the LGS experience at home and stuff like that. So, if you're worried about lighting on your cards, and I mean, you can look at the Loading Ready Run Commander streams, the paper streams we've been doing here. Again, you could check out Olivia's stream of what the camera looks like, what the glare looks like, and the trick to removing glare. There's two tricks. One is indirect light. So you need light in your room so that the camera can actually see what it's looking at, but you can't have the light pointing at it. And that might seem really unintuitive if you've ever thought of something like that, but I have two lights in my podcast in my office that point at me. And when I stream Magic, they're actually pointing away at the walls and are at really, really low light. And you can kind of balance it before the game goes. You can start changing the angle of the light, but you want the room probably darker than you think, with light just barely touching the cards. This is something Wheeler did before. Try removing your outer sleeves. A lot of glare in sleeves.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine those at home won't have to deal with Twitch chat freaking out about like beta cards being played in like tight fit sleeves. Um,
I hope you were riffling.
I was too,
Oh
Jared.
yeah,
Nice.
you love
Yeah.
to see it.
I mean, I don't like I mean as a general thing too, like I own my cards to play with my
Oh yeah,
cards.
you know that's strongly my stance as well.
Yeah, except for the cards that I own to not play with, but that's a different story. Like they're most like 99.9% of my collection, I want to play with it, which means that like I'm going to shuffle it. Like ideally, I'm going to either, I'm going to keep my copy of Candelabra until I either die or I really need to like, I need an emergency $700 or whatever it is. Um, the Arrested Development, like how much could a banana cost? $10? Because like I have no concept of what these cards are worth because I just want to play them. So like if you're hesitant to remove sleeves, the inner sleeves, honestly, they felt great when shuffling. And playing them out, it removed enough glare, but also made them feel smooth for movement and
Hmm.
and for relaying to my opponents whether a thing was tapped or not, just because it makes it easier. So you don't have to go like buck naked magic cards. You can have a little bit of a cover too.
Yeah. This is something that wasn't really intuitive to me until Olivia actually gave me this tip. But if you're playing camera magic, there are certain cards that just don't work. Like we talked about how there's cards that are bugged on Magic Online. Well, there are cards that are bugged when you're playing over video call, and that's specifically cards that steal your opponent's cards. It's very hard. It's very easy if we're at YJ for me to, reanimate dead a card in Jer's graveyard. I just reach over into Jer's graveyard. I take his card and I put it onto my board state. I can't reach through a camera, right? Like
Why not,
it's
Serge?
yeah. So examples of this: treachery, reanimate spells, uh, cards that I didn't even think about. Mimic Vat. When I played some stream games the other day, I had a Mimic Vat in my deck, and I was like, "Oh, this will be just kind of fun, kind of cute. It's not too powerful. It'll do stuff." It's impossible to really indicate on the board how that's going to work, and in this way, it's tough, right? Because we're playing Highlander, we're playing a format where it's sort of agreed upon that both players are playing like competitive decks, and we're going to smash,
Yeah.
right? Like it seems weird to play sort of these almost chivalrous cards of, all right, we both agree that to make the game as easily communicable as possible, like to communicate the board state in a way that both players follow what's happening along, you don't make misplays due to misunderstanding, that you just
Right.
omit some cards.
I think that, I mean, communication, no matter how you're doing it, is going to be key, right? Like it's if you're 1v1 even in a casual match, you want everybody to be on the same page because then you're just going to play the best Magic and have the most fun with it. But like I agree with everything you're saying from like a broadcaster standpoint. And I think a lot of those experiences are drawn from that position. But like if you're just playing like casual, like, hey, does anybody want to like just jam webcam Highlander for like 3 hours? And if you're just having fun and testing things out, like if you have like a stack of sticky notes,
Oh yeah, yeah. There's a workaround. Yeah, that's fair.
yeah, there are a bunch of like workarounds that they don't have to be glamorous, right? Like if I'm going to bribery someone for and like
You're like,
take
fan
their
out your whole library in front of me so I can see it. I mean, I guess if you
yeah,
submit deck lists, it works. I mean, Thada Adele is another example of something that used to see a lot of play in the format, occasionally still might, but would be really hard to sort of figure out in this
right.
particular.
And it's all the like it's about having fun, right? Like if
Yeah.
aside from like a webcam tournament, like we're speaking, getting games in and testing and having, being enjoyable, you could like these issues can pop up for webcam tournaments for sure, but even then, like, I mean, just rule number one: don't be a scumbag. like if if I'm bribing you or whatever, like if somebody cast a bribery against me in webcam magic, and I was like, I can go through all my creatures, like I'll ignore like my mana dorks or whatever, and I can tell you what they are. And then if they ask like, do you have any like, sorry, do you mind if I ask like what how many Armageddons you have or whatever,
Sure, right?
right? I'm not going to be like, I just have Armageddon and be like, haha, you didn't say how many Ravages of War and
Ravages.
Cataclysms do you have? Yeah, exactly. Like,
Got
I think
him.
we're all doing it for the love of the game, and we're all doing it. Like, this whole episode is based off of like, hey, things suck right now, but we all love Canadian Highlander, so let's play Canadian Highlander, and
Yeah,
here's
good
how,
point. Good
right?
point.
So, like, I think that, everybody doing what we can with the circumstances considered, we can make it work,
Be
right? It's,
chivalrous, or as Ben Ulmer, our good friend, would say, just don't be a dong.
yeah. Yeah, don't I mean I don't we can't swear on this and I won't, but yeah, don't be a you know what. Like it's I mean like it's really that easy. Just be a reasonable human being.
All right. I I have one other point I wanted to say, but this is such a great point to end the episode on. But I feel this is important to add. If you're playing Magic over a video call, have some type of card software open, be it Gatherer or Scryfall or something like that. Uh,
Hmm.
Not having to constantly ask people what their cards do will speed up the game and make it a lot more enjoyable for both people, because you can look across and be like, oh, what does Caracas do again, to use Wheeler's example? Probably help stuff
Okay.
out.
Well, it wasn't what it did. You know what?
That's fair
He
enough.
was
All
just
right.
so taken aback it was a new border.
Why would Robin of all people have a new bordered Caracas? Oh.
All right. So we had a beautiful sort of wrap up to the episode right there on we love the game. Things suck right now, and here's some ways to keep playing it if that's what you want to do to make yourself happy. And honestly, that's the most important thing right now. Do you two have anything else to add before we move to our closing segments?
I mean, part of it is kind of just what I said, where like I see a lot of people talking about, how like how much they miss the gathering part of Magic the Gathering. And doubly so for community driven formats, right? But I think we should use that to our advantage that like these formats are able to exist because people are so passionate about them and they have like it's they go to bed thinking about what card like what 4-drop they want to try out in mono red, and they wake up remembering Pyrite Spellbomb is a card or whatever it may be. And so like I think that if you find yourself feeling like, oh, I haven't played Magic with a bunch of people, like I'm not going to pretend like it's going to give the exact same experience as a big tournament, but you're not alone. There are other people out there that are looking for, jamming these games, and there are the resources to find them. And it I played like a homebrew pre-release with a bunch of buddies where we just kind of were on Discord talking while playing the games, and it was exactly what I needed. Like it was you having that communication, knowing there are other people similarly looking to jam the games, like they exist, and it's important that people know that. And I really encourage looking to do that.
Thank
You're
you.
going to have a blast.
Jer?
If you're looking for ways to play Magic, just know that there are there are other people looking to do the same, and there are ways like we can continue to enjoy the format that we all enjoy. So try to find whichever one fits best for you, and get in.
Fantastic. All right. Let's move on then to our closing segment, Powerful Magic. I slurred that. Let's try that again. Sorry. We'll cut this in post. We probably won't cut this in post. Let's go now to our closing segment, Powerful Magic. Much better. And up today, we have a certain Benjamin Wheeler. Take it away.
Okay, so I figured we'd keep it on a bit of a lighter note. So this is going to be a callback to some of the most devastating self-sabotages I've ever had.
Love it. Love it.
They're both actually related to a deck that is near and dear to my heart, but like in a very weird way. High Tide. So I don't know how many people actually know that, like, in the early days of Canlander, like 2009, well, the early days, air quote, like 10 years ago, like 2009, 2010, High Tide was like a deck that was like my world until I gave my Palancron to Serge, or one of them. It was like sending a kid off to college. But
like, I'm so proud. Tears.
But like I would try the weirdo stuff, or at the time, which seemed to be weirdo stuff. So here are two really quick bad beat stories. The first one is I was experimenting with adding other cards. And remember, this is 2010, so we didn't have like Dark Petition or anything. But I wanted to try a High Tide with black and play, Demonic Tutor and Yawgmoth's Will and whatnot. And I remember building my deck, and then I had actually lent out a tutor, not Demonic Tutor, but I believe like Grim Tutor or Ristic Tutor to somebody. And they still had the card, and they weren't at the tournament. Excuse me. And so I was looking for like a card to fill that slot, like a black card that could, fuel my hand and whatnot. And there are plenty of good options, but I went with a really bad one. And I included Dark Confidant, because in my head was like, oh, they're not going to keep a hand with removal against High Tide. Like, they know what I'm playing. Like, there's only 10 of us in this room. This will work out well.
I'm grimacing. Bob. I'm grimacing right now.
Oh, get ready for even more.
Really quickly here, if people aren't familiar, tell us what Dark Confidant does.
Sure. So Dark Confidant, aka Bob, is 1 and a black for a 2/1 human wizard, I want to say, that has at the beginning of your upkeep, reveal the top card of your library and put it into your hand. You lose life equal to its converted mana cost. And
the flavor text is greatness at any cost.
Yeah, that's a huge part of this. And so simultaneously, while I thought, hey, this would be a good thing to try out, why don't I also, at the time I was like, okay, I'm going to play, actually, no, this was right as Omniscience came out. So this would have been 2012. So Omniscience came out. And I'm like, well, Omniscience sounds like a cool thing for me to try out. Like I can, I'll show and tell out of an Omniscience. I add a bunch of mana. Maybe I'll try Emrakul in my deck too. And so I was playing a version I slid in this Bob last minute, but I also had Show and Tell, Emrakul, Show and Tell, and like Omniscience in there. And I kid you not, match 1, game 1, round 1, I play a turn 2 Bob, and my opponent goes, what? Like, they're shocked because they thought I was on High Tide, and they audibly say, like, I don't have a way to kill this. And I go, yeah, haha, my plan's all coming together. And on my first upkeep, I flip Omniscience, and on my second upkeep, I flip Emrakul. And I die.
Justice.
Yeah.
The old greedy Bob. That brings me back to old school stories. I remember playing back when Shane used to play a lot of Highlander before he got too busy turning into like a really high quality butcher. I remember playing him, and he had greedy Bob in like an early Academy deck. And same sort of thing, just flipping like Blightsteel Titan or Blightsteel Colossus, whatever it is. You're just like, cool, just casually dome yourself for 11 forehead. Like,
Yeah, just so when people say that like Bob isn't as good in Canlander as it would be in other formats, like we're not referring to when we big brain like flip a 15 drop. But you know, it is that's another reason thing to think about, I guess.
That's amazing. All right. Well, thank you so much, friends, for listening to today's episode. Now, really quick, if you are in an online community and you're looking for Canadian Highlander and you're not in the Facebook group and you're not in the Discord, let us know down in the comments. If you're looking for people to play with, let's use this as a way to connect with each other because I think that'd be absolutely fantastic. I want to remind you that this podcast is brought to you by you with your support over at the Patreon, over at patreon.com/LoneyReadyRun. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.